Thanks for tuning in to Farmer Theologian, a podcast designed to help you build deeply rooted practical theology. Let's get to work.
All right, friends, welcome back to a new episode of Farmer Theologian. Thank you to all of you who have been reaching out to offer feedback on the episodes. Tell me what you thought of them. Tell me that you're praying for me, those kind of things. Always appreciative of that feedback. Today, we're going to take a break from our spiritual discipline series for just one episode. I want to talk about a topic that I've been thinking on for a long time. It's really been kind of somewhat a multi-year process, but especially the past year, been trying to refine processes and ways I've done things. And so I've just been brooding over this idea and talking to some people. They recommended, it'd be good to put it together in kind of a resource or episode of the podcast to be helpful. So today's topic is ongoing analog. By that, I mean, I'm specifically referring to purposefully, intentionally choosing low-tech options for certain things in our lives, in the way we work through things, in the way we study, in the way we really approach our day-to-day lives. And so today's format, I'm going to talk in kind of one section about how to, or why to, I should say, go analog. Why is there a reason for that? A little bit of a theological understanding behind it, biblical basis for it, and, slow down. I'm not going to give you legalistic standards, but some ideas to think about, some biblical principles to think about on why you would choose low-tech, slower, analog options instead of digital, high-tech, high-speed options. And then I'm going to go through several different ways that I have gone analog, several different ways that I have chosen the low-tech option and why I've chosen those, and give you some examples. I will say up front, this is probably going to be a more visual episode than I usually do. At this point, I'm really only doing the videos because it was the easiest way that I could figure out how to get the podcast. And so the videos are really just a means to an end. But this episode might be different. This is going to be a little visual. So if you're watching, or if you're listening to this rather in your car or some other time on the podcast format, I will try to talk way through it in a way that is helpful. But this might be an episode to just wait until you can watch it on YouTube and see the visuals, because there's going to be a lot of visuals. I'm going to use some visual examples of ways that I do these things that will be helpful. So first, let's dive in and talk about why we would go analog. First things first, I feel like I have to say I am not a Luddite. I am not opposed to technology. I believe technology is a gift of the Lord. It is His common grace. I believe He hardwired technology into His creation, and He has graciously allowed us as human beings to draw that out, to extract it over the centuries according to His perfect timing. So I'm very thankful for technology, and most technology does have an option to use for the glory of God. And so this is not an anti-technology rant by any means. I believe if you are using technology to the glory of the Lord, then praise the Lord for that. And in some ways, all of this is technology. Like most of the ways that I've gone analog involve pen and paper, which is a certain advancement in technology. And so I am not against technology. I'm just advocating for using it wisely and using slower technology when it's actually more beneficial than what may seem better in the quicker, faster digital technology. And so I'm not a Luddite. If you use technology, if you say, man, Eric, I've listened to all these and none of those would be helpful for me, praise the Lord. That's great. Use what is helpful for you. My suggestions here are intended to be that, to be helpful. Second, I want to just remind us of 1 Corinthians 6:12, which tells us essentially all things can be lawful for us, can be useful for us. They're not all profitable, and we should never be enslaved by anything. We should not be enslaved to any technology. And the reason I bring this up is because I believe digital media is particularly, and a lot of forms of digital media are particularly designed to be enslaving, to hold its grasp on us. I remember hearing an interview with Steve Jobs where he's talking about the design of the iPhone, and it was fascinating in the sense of all the things they thought about that were mainly designed so that you would never put your iPhone down. How comfortable it was in your hand, how thick the casing was so that it would give you just the right warmth, that it wouldn't be cold to your touch because then you would want to put it down, but it also wouldn't be hot because then you would put it down. It would have this perfect kind of warmth. They have thought through these things in order to be enslaving to us and to keep us coming back for more. Even the fact that your indication little bubble on your notifications is red and not blue as it originally was, because they figured out the red will entice you to come back more. You want to keep coming back to see that little red notification bubble. So I think we have to be honest and say that and realize that some technologies, some use of media and digital technologies is designed to enslave us. And if we are not to be enslaved by anything, including technology, that should inform our approach to how we use things. And so the idea of going analog is mainly tied to, for me personally, not wanting to be enslaved to certain technologies. And we'll talk about this when I get into the specific examples, how many of the things that I do are designed to offset that enslavement. The other thing that it really motivates me in terms of wanting to use these kinds of systems is that it does aid in, for me, in study and in retention of information. For me, slower technologies give me a better opportunity to think deeply on things and to meditate upon them, to where something may be more efficient. I may be able to get it done quicker, but I won't know it as well. I remember, especially in time, there were times in seminary, and this is not a criticism of seminary, it's really a criticism of myself. I was so crammed and I was so trying to get things done as fast as possible that I would write a paper and I would think, somebody would ask me a question about it and I'd be like, I have to go read it. Like, I have to go remind myself of what I studied to write that paper. And so I think the speed of processing information, even for putting it out for teaching or for defining your views or those things, doesn't always aid us in true meditation on and retention of that information. So those are kind of the two guiding principles that I would encourage you to think about and just examine yourself. I don't want to make a hard, fast, legalistic rule for anything, but if something is enslaving you, you should be putting that off. And are you really, particularly in study and in those things where we want to meditate upon and study God's word, are you using technology in a way that aids with that or that prevents that? And where those things are not really setting in, or where you are being enslaved, those might be ways where it's a good idea for you to go analog. So let's look at some ways that I have gone analog. I'm going to give you some specific examples. All right, so this is the first way that I have chosen to go analog. This is a bullet journal. This is what I use for planning. Bullet journal is a system originally designed by Ryder Carroll, but there are so many adaptations and different things. People even argue over what is a bullet journal, what's a real bullet journal versus what's a adaptation, those kind of things. This is what I use here. As you can see, I kind of use the standard thing. I have a future log. This is set up for starting in July. So I thought it best to show you this with a blank. Here's where I'll put plans and things that need to happen in the next couple months. Kind of keep a to-do list of projects and things that are on the way. I usually keep this in the front for 6 to 12 months so that I can be thinking ahead, planning ahead. And then I also have a monthly spread. This is how I do it. I don't do a weekly one. I do a monthly thing, and then I'll put my each day as I'm planning out my week, I'll kind of put in my 3 priorities. And I also have a habit tracker here on the side that I use to do those things. Then each month, I also keep a journal in here of 2 different things. I have a daily focus on things that I'm grateful for. It's gratitude. Just write 1 line a day of things that I'm thankful for, grateful for. And then on this side, kind of 1-line summary of the day. That helps me to be thinking about what I'm doing and also kind of serve as kind of a good way to reflect on God's providence in my life as I think back on these things. This is kind of my daily layout. This is obviously a blank one. I'll show you a completed one here in a minute, but this is what I start with each day as I plan out the day. In each of these, I have kind of a reading goal. This is a system I've developed off of seeing different suggestions on YouTube. So it's not original to me, but I keep track of how much I've read, and I could kind of quickly flip through and see how my reading's been going, how consistent I've been in reading and study. So this is kind of my overall blank layout that I use. I write this out. I use, this is a Leuchtturm 1917 book. I use the dot grid because that's what I find preferable, but it's just a basic way of keeping track of things. Now, why particularly would I use a bullet journal and write it out and go through all this time instead of using an app. Well, I've tried using all the apps, and for me, if I'm using an app, first thing I want to do is log in the morning and kind of see my day. And that provides plenty of distractions for me. Digital technology, when it comes to planning, for me, is just a way to be distracted by other things. So I might log onto my phone or pull up on my iPad quickly thinking, oh, I'm just going to check the calendar. I'm just going to knock that thing off the to-do list. But then I end up getting distracted by social media, by emails, by text messages, all those different things. So using this as a day planner really helps me minimize distractions, and that's why I use it. Now I'll show you a completed one of a day to show you a little bit of follow-up on how I work this system. So here we have an example of sort of a completed day for me. What I do is I start with kind of my morning routine. I totally just took this from Reagan Rose, Redeeming Productivity. This is his power morning concept. You have prayer, organize your day, time in the Word, exercise and reading or writing. Each day is kind of a morning routine. And then I'll put the things that I need to do during the day in kind of a to-do list format. I use the bullet journal system. So a task is a dot, a meeting will be a circle, and I give the time for those. Then I've also adapted this very simple time blocking schedule. This is the simplest one that's useful for me. I do one line with all the time from the time I am waking up until the time that hopefully I'm going to bed. And I'll put what I intend to do on those. If I break into the half an hour, I put a slash and put the time for that. I leave this little space here in case something changes, I need to change it. I can just re-block it right next to it. And that allows me to see, did I follow the plan? Did the plan have to get adjusted? And again, I can kind of quickly look back over these things and see how often the plan is working out according to plan and how often it has to be changed or rejected. And then this down here, sometimes this is more full than others. I just kind of reflect on the day and talk about what kind of day it is. It's a kind of quick journaling method for me. As you see, I didn't do any reading this day. It was a very busy day, so there was no reading done on this day. But usually if I've read, each of these blocks for me represents 20 pages with a goal of reading 100 pages. So if I've read 20 pages, I'll mark out one block and so on and so forth. So these will be filled to different levels each day. But that's how I use the bullet journal for organization. And again, this keeps me from going to a phone or an iPad or something like that that will ultimately be a distraction for me. So first way that I've gone analog that's been helpful is my bullet journal planning system. All right, here's the second way that I have gone digital. And this really is the thing that has, for me, unlocked staying away from my phone, breaking enslavement to particularly my phone has been this. I got this idea from a YouTuber that's a philosophy and theology guy who also has a lot of videos on effective study. This is his name is Parker Settecase. He runs a couple of YouTube sites, Parker's Pinsies and Park Notes. Those are really great ones if you want to find some more tips. But this is a pocket Proverbs book. What this is a book of pithy sayings that I read. You see, I open it up with a few Proverbs here. But then as I'm reading, as I'm studying, as I'm reading in the Word, I'm writing down pithy sayings that I find to be wise or helpful from those things. And I'm just keeping a list of them. I think this would be called a Zivildoni or maybe a commonplace book. I think I'm still learning the meaning of those terms specifically. But it's just a collection of wise sayings. How I use this is when I'm tempted to go to my phone, to scroll social media, to scroll through emails, to otherwise be distracted. Instead of pulling out my phone, I'll pull out this book, read through some wise quotes, sometimes a page, sometimes just one quote. I'll remind myself of wisdom that I've gleaned, hopefully, from others, and start building up my retention of that information. So this is really good if you are if you are one who is prone to kind of the death scroll. And you see, this is a little pocket notebook from Moleskine or Moleskine. I feel like it's said several different ways. But this is just a little pocket notebook. It goes in my front pocket. I wear Carhartt shirts all the time. So this goes in my front pocket. And when I'm tempted to pull out my phone and do the doom scroll, instead I pull this out, read some wise things that I've said that stood out to me enough to write them down and try to remind myself of this wisdom. So if you are one who is prone to doom scrolling, this would be the first place I would suggest you go analog. Get a little pocket notebook and write down pithy sayings, pocket proverbs, if you will. keep it in your pocket, keep it with you, so that you can both write in it, but also you can read it and study it instead of doom scrolling on your phone. So this is a way, Pocket Proverbs, way number 2 that I have gone analog. All right, this is way number 3 that I've gone analog. I feel like at this point, I feel compelled to say that I am not sponsored by Moleskine or by Leuchtturm 1917 books, though if they do want to send me some free books, I'm not opposed. But this is my means of sermon study. So one of the key ways that I have gone analog is in my sermon study, particularly in my keeping of notes. This is one of those areas where I feel like the attempts to grow in wisdom and retain information has been most benefited by me doing this analog. So if you are a Logos person, if you are a digital note taker, be prepared to be offended, but this is what I do. And I would encourage you, even if you don't stick with it long term, maybe this is something you can try. So as you see, this is my study notebook on Luke, which is currently what I am preaching through. And essentially what this is a commonplace book going by the text that I am preaching each week. So you'll see at the very beginning, I kind of have my own table of contents of what page each section is studied on. And then I have introduction. I started with some study Bibles and notes from them, different commentaries in their introduction. And what this is, as I'm reading through the commentaries, I will make a note, usually a tick mark in the margin of the book, of things that I think stand out to me. And then as I'm done with that, I'll go back and I'll take the highlights of each commentary and what I learned from that and write it down in this. And then when I'm preparing my sermon, I will use this as kind of a review of my notes and the things that stood out to me. The things in red are quotes, kind of direct quotes that I think might be useful in a sermon. I'm not a big quote user in sermons. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but I feel like they can easily become a crutch for me, so I don't use it a lot. But nevertheless, I often will write down, oh, I think this might be a note that is useful for me in sermon prep. So this is a helpful tool for study for me. Again, it becomes kind of a commonplace book. You'll see each time I start a new sermon, I have the text of that. I begin with kind of my overall process. This has changed. If you flip through this notebook, you'll see the order that I do these things is different. But I'm just organizing my study and taking notes in a way that it's all in one place so that when I sit down to work on the sermon, my notes are in one place. I'm not having to pull off and think through what book was that in, what that quote that I got, where was it from. It's all right here in this nice commonplace book. And I find that doing this in an analog fashion, actually sitting down, writing it out, slows me down, makes me think on it more, helps me to retain the information better. And I also have developed kind of now where I have my own commonplace book of what stood out to me from these different commentators, lexicons, things like that stood out to me in my study. And so when I need to go back, if I were to say, hey, I need to do a sermon on that text again, if it's a sermon I preached, then it becomes more efficient because I can pull out the fruit of the study that I've already done, and it's right here. I could just remind myself of those things. So one key way that I've gone analog is in my sermon study, doing a commonplace book as I work through books of the Bible and study these things. So if you are a pastor or teacher, even a Sunday school teacher, or just somebody who wants to study the scriptures for yourself, I would highly recommend at least giving a try of doing sort of a commonplace notebook that's analog, that's written out, that slows you down and makes you think about it and really decide what you want to put in there, because it's not a matter of just copy and paste. And so you have to think through, what am I going to put? What's worthy of my retention? And work through that. So there's another means of going analog, the commonplace book for sermon study. Okay, and speaking of study, here's another way that I found to go analog that's been helpful. This is for research purposes, more particularly. So if you are one who is in the field of research, or a student, maybe you just like to do it, whether you're doing it for a degree or just to be informed to do research, this is a way I found. As you'll see when I open this up, this is something I haven't been doing for a long time, so it's a fairly new thing for me. But this is basically a good old-fashioned card catalog. So as you'll see, I have cards represented here for different things alphabetically, and then within those I have topics. So here in the B category, I have, or in the A category, I have assurance. In B, I have baptism and Bible. And so these are just kind of topics. And you'll see I kind of pull out a card. Here is a good old fashioned note keeping card from doing research. And so what I'll do is if I come across something in my research that I think is really important, quotable, I'll go ahead and give it a heading of different topics that this might apply to, and write out the quote or the information from that resource that I want. And then on the back, I include the bibliographical information so that I know where I got this quote from. Now, you may be thinking, man, that is so slow. Yes, and that is intentionally so. Again, it helps me to retain the information. It makes me take a little more seriously what it is that I think would be useful. And also, it just helps me to be more intentional about the study. And again, it keeps me from distracted. One of the things that I found personally in taking notes on a computer or an iPad was I was always distracted by the other apps, other options on the computer and iPad. This helps limit that as well. If you're thinking, man, that's so slow, but my Evernote or my Notability or those things are searchable, how would I ever do that? I do have a system here, as you see. Again, I have the subject headings, and you'll see a card number there. I do have a spreadsheet in my computer once I'm done, and I want to, from the end of a study session, put in the cards. I will put in the card in the spreadsheet. I will have the card number, the headings, topics, and the book title and author in that. And so if I wanted to search quickly to find something without flipping through the card catalog, and when I'm writing or doing a paper or a sermon or something where I'm going to use that research, I can search it quickly. I have found a way of doing that, but during the research process, this slows me down, helps me learn the information more, and prevents the distraction of the other things that are formed in digital format. So if you're a researcher, I know it may seem counterintuitive, but if you really want to learn the things that you're researching and be more efficient, be less distracted, let me encourage you. Maybe you want to start your own good old fashioned card catalog for your research. Card catalog for research, that's another way that I've gone analog. One more way that I've gone analog, and this is really just particularly for preachers, teachers of God's word. But the final way that I have gone analog and found that it's been really helpful for me is in my sermon manuscripts. So as you see here, these are sermons that I preached on the book of Zechariah. And you'll see these dashes are places where I was not able to write out my manuscript in here that week. So I'm certainly not perfect on this. But what I do is I write out my sermon manuscripts here. And again, this is a Leuchtturn. Again, I'm not sponsored by Leuchtturn. But if anybody is listening that has connections in Leuchtturn and wants to send me free books, I do go through a lot of these. And so I'm always willing to take free books. But here is how I do it. I just write out my sermon manuscripts by hand each week. This is sort of the final editorial process for me as I edit out what should or shouldn't be in the sermon, as I work through things, refine my homiletics, refine my cross references that I'm going to use, get the timing down for the sermon, those kind of things. I find this is helpful. I also find this has been the best means of me not being enslaved to my notes. If I've thought it through enough and then gone ahead and written it out as my final edit, I know it better, and I am less enslaved to the notes. I'm still growing in this as a preacher. I'm hopefully always going to be growing as a preacher. So this is not perfect, but it is the means that I have found helpful, especially in retaining the information that I'm preaching, so that if somebody asks me a question about it, I'm not lost in thinking, what did I say again? But I have really thought it through to the point that I know it, not just in the sense that I can say it. This also prevents me from having technological glitches impact the sermon. This never runs out of power. The screen never defaults on me, those kind of things. I just preach from these notes. As you can see, sometimes I have to add some things in here and there and change it up. So there are certainly some weaknesses to this. But I have found going analog in my sermon manuscript has been very helpful to me as a preacher. And so this is yet another way that I found beneficial to slow down and choose the low-tech option and go analog. Well, all right, friends, that's kind of it for me. Those are the key ways that I have gone analog. I have chosen intentionally low technology, slower paced options to help me to improve study, minimize distractions, make me more effective in what I do for work and in my ministry. I pray that's been helpful for you. I'd love to hear some feedback. If you have found, I'm always kind of looking to refine systems and get better at what I'm doing. And so if you have some tips or tricks that you have found helpful, feel free to send me an email, leave those in the comments. I would love to hear about that. As we kind of wrap this up, I just want to give you a couple of exhortations, ways to think about this. Again, I don't want you to just take this and copy and paste and do what I do, become enslaved to my systems. This really is about freeing us from slavery to certain kinds of technology that are designed to enslave us. And so the first thing I would encourage you is know yourself. Know if you're using technology for the glory of the Lord or if you are enslaved to technology. If you are enslaved to that technology, remember again what Scripture calls us to. Just because something is not sinful for you in and of itself doesn't mean it can't be master over you. And it is sinful for us as Christians to allow things to be master over us other than the Lord Jesus Christ. So if you are enslaved to technology, let me encourage you, give a different system a try, and perhaps give an analog system a try in order to help you not be enslaved to that technology. And then the other thing I would tell you is just understand that if you try this, you haven't lost anything if you go back to doing what you're doing. If you try a different system and it doesn't work out for you, that's fine. We can always go back to doing what we're doing. We haven't lost anything. In fact, we've gained some information. That way of doing things doesn't work well for me, isn't more helpful for me in my pursuit of the glory of the Lord, in my vocation, in my ministry, those kind of things. And so give it a try. If it doesn't work for you, you can always go back. The third thing I would tell you is be willing to adjust. If you take one of the things that I've suggested here and you try to do it just like mine looked, make it look just like mine looked, and it doesn't work for you, maybe you don't need to scrap the system altogether. Maybe you just need to adjust how you do it. There are different ways that folks can do things in a way that will help them. And so I just want to encourage you, give these things a try, see if it doesn't help you, particularly with your retention of information, your elimination of distractions, and not being enslaved to certain technologies. And I would give a kind of final warning, especially to, well, not really especially to men. I was going to say especially to men, but truly this affects all of us. Particularly digital technologies have mastered the art of using sex to enslave us, of using lustful images to enslave us. And so if you are running in that tendency where the lustful images are what is locking you into technology, you particularly need to be vigilant in picking a format that doesn't have that option. And a blank piece of paper doesn't come inherently with an option or a throwing of that temptation before you. So let me encourage you, particularly if you are enslaved to technology because of the lustful images that they use to enslave us, those are things that you want to try to eliminate, cast off, cut it off from you. Even if it is more efficient in time management, if it's leading you into sin, get rid of it, dear friends. So let me encourage you, know yourself again, know where you're enslaved and where you are, put those things off and see if you don't have more success in being faithful to honor the Lord by slowing yourself down and removing that enslaving technology. Well, friends, this has been a pretty full episode. Again, it's been mostly visual. So if you are listening to this and you think, man, I don't understand what he's talking about, go back and listen to it on the YouTube channel or watch it on the YouTube channel, I should say. But thank you for tuning in to this episode of Farmer Theologian as we continue to build deeply rooted practical theology.
One more thing before we close, friends. If this episode has been an encouragement or a blessing to you, let me encourage you to do two things. The first is to pray for me. I know that I cannot do this in my own strength, so I greatly appreciate your prayers. And the second thing is share this episode with a friend. And then come back next time for another episode of Farmer Theologian.